Waiofar was the last independent Duke of Aquitaine from 745 to 768. He peacefully succeeded his father, Hunald I, after the latter entered a monastery. He also inherited the conflict with Pepin the Short, king of the Franks, and his nominal suzerain. War with Pepin. The beginning of open conflict between Waiofar and Pepin can be dated to 753, when the Duke of Aquitaine granted asylum to Pepin's brother Grifo after the latter was forced to flee Francia because of his failed attempt at usurping the Duchy of Bavaria from its rightful lord. Pepin's immediate reaction is not recorded, but Grifo was subsequently assassinated while preparing to leave Aquitaine for Rome. Between 752 and 759, Pepin's forces besieged the city of Narbonne, the chief town of Septimania, which had been conquered by the Arabs. For reasons unknown, Waiofar attacked Pepin's forces, as his father had attacked Charles Martel. In the words of the Annals of Anian, only the local sources, the Chronicle of Moisic and Annals of Anian, record this attack. Although the Chronicle of Uses records that the Rouergue was conquered by Pepin in 754, during the siege of Narbonne, it is more likely that its conquest was effected with the assistance of the local Visigoths only after the fall of Narbonne. The Annals of Anian and Chronicle of Moisic indicate that the Frankish army under Pepin began the conquest of southern Aquitaine immediately after the fall of Narbonne in 759, and by 762 Luz, Rodez and Albi had fallen into the hands. In 760, Pepin denounced Waiofar's seizure of church lands and prepared to march against him. Ignoring the latter's request for peace, Pepin invaded Berry and the Auvergne and ravaged a large part of Aquitaine. In 761, Waiofar responded by ordering Count Chunibert of Borscht and Count Blandinus of the Auvergne, his followers who controlled the northeastern borders of Aquitaine, to assemble the forces for an attack on Chalon-sur-Saône. This army probably consisted mostly of local levies, since no Gascon presence is mentioned. The Gascons, whose presence the continuator of the Chronicle of Fredegar is otherwise scrupulous to record, were recruited from Gascony and served a professional corps of Waiofar's army. In the ensuing campaign, Burgundy was ravaged, but Pepin pushed the invaders back and took the fortresses of Bourbon, Chantelle and Clermont in the Auvergne, forcing Count Blandinus to surrender. The garrison at Bourbon is described by the continuator of Fredegar as the men of Waiofar. At the end of this campaign, Pepin obtained permanent control of many fortresses in the Auvergne by treaty. In 762, Pepin invaded Berry and Poitou. He captured Bourges, forcing the surrender of Count Chunibert. After a lengthy siege in which breastworks were erected around the city and ramparts constructed for putting siege weapons up to the walls, Thouars fell the same year, and the Count of Poitiers made submission to Pepin. The Annales Loricenses Mayors record that many Gascons in the following of the Counts of Bourges and Poitiers were captured and brought back to Neustria. In 762, Waiofar's cousin Count Manchot, with the Gascon levy, lay in ambush for a Carolingian force, either as it was entering or leaving Narbonne. His men dismounted and lay in wait, but in the subsequent battle they were routed. Manchot and the Gascons fled on foot, and the Carolingians took the horses as booty. In 763, Waiofar offered to submit to Pepin if he would receive Bourges and other Aquitanian cities in exchange for whatever tribute and gifts Frankish kings had been accustomed to receive from the province of Aquitaine. Nothing came of it. In 763, Pepin raided deep into Aquitaine as far as the Limousin and Quercy. According to the continuator of Fredegar, Waiofar opposed Pepin with a great army and many Vascons from across the Garonne, who in antiquity were called Vassetti, in 765. The great army and the large levy of Gascons may be distinct forces brought together for this campaign. In 764, Count Chilping of the Auvergne led such a dual force of local levies complemented by some Gascon soldiers taken from the garrison of Clermont. Between 763 and 766, Waiofar withdrew his garrisons from the cities of Poitiers, Limoges, Saintes, Périgueux and Angoulême. Most of these fortifications were restored after the cities were occupied by Pepin's forces. Archibald Lewis believes it was Pepin who destroyed the walls after he had conquered the cities if he judged he could not hold them. His interpretation is contradicted by Bernard Batrac, who believes it was Waiofar who, before abandoning his cities, destroyed the defenses and walls to prevent Pepin from using them against him. This final phase of the war was fought with increasing brutality, and the chroniclers record that Pepin burnt villas, despoiled vineyards and depopulated monasteries. During this period the fortress of Berry was held by a Frankish garrison. Loss of power and death. By 766 most of Waiofar's followers had abandoned him, but the war over Aquitaine did not end even with his death, shortly before Pepin's own. In 768, the final active phase of the war between the two was fought mainly in the Périgord, the Angoumois and the Bordelais, all regions closer to Gascony, which if not ruled directly by Waiofar was either under his control or allied to him. The chroniclers record how Pepin destroyed fortresses and cities, castella and civitates, and so devastated the countryside that there was no settler to work the land. Around this time, Pepin defeated the Gascons in pitched battle. In 768, the erstwhile Count of Borscht submitted to Pepin. Most of Waiofar's family was captured and executed in the forest of Périgord. Waiofar's kinsman, perhaps his son, Hunald II, succeeded to his claims on Aquitaine and continued to fight against Pepin's successor, Charles. Administration of Aquitaine. There is one charter issued by Waiofar preserved in the cartulary of the Basilica of St. Julian at Brioude, styling himself and his predecessor, Hunald, princes. Waiofar granted a villa to one Gedeon as a precarium for life in exchange for another villa and £2 of silver. The charter was drawn up around 756 to 57 in the Limagne. Waiofar may have been copying the policy of his rival Pepin from 743 to 44, when the latter ordered his followers who had received church lands to return them to the church, make a payment and receive them back as precaria verbo regis from the church. By creating pecaria, Waiofar could raise men and troops to defend Aquitaine from the impending war with Pepin. The continuator of Fredegar records how Waiofar confiscated church lands and distributed them to his followers. According to He of Chaban, writing 250 years later, Pepin granted 2 villas to the canons of the Abbey of St. Martial and the Cathedral of St. Etienne at Limoges during his wars with Waiofar. Although much is known of Waiofar's wars with Pepin the Short, little is known of his administration of Aquitaine. He did use counts to govern major cities in the Frankish manner.
At least Borscht, Poitiers and the Auvergne had Aquitanian counts. In the case of Thouars, which was merely a castle, a count was appointed to command a garrison. Archibald Lewis suggests that the abundance of Gascon troops among Waiofar's forces stems from an unrecorded alliance with Duke Lupus II of Gascony. In the same way, he suggests Pepin formed an alliance with the Goths of Septimania after his conquest of Narbonne. Waiofar's uncle Remestanius, although he was not in the service of the Duke, was wealthy enough to form an army to besiege several Carolingian garrisons. In 765, Pepin bribed Remestanius with gold, silver, cloth, horses and arms to come over to his side. He appointed him to govern the eastern half of the region of Bourges up to the river Cher and granted him control of the citadel in the city itself. At the time, Chunibert, who had served as Count of Bourges under Waiofar until he lost the city to Pepin in 762, was again serving as Count, this time to Pepin.